So, I hear you're taking a trip to the Americas during the 15th century when the Aztec Empire was at large. Excellent choice. One of my favorite times, personally. I'm Courtney. I'll be your guide before your trip, and I'll tell you everything you need to know in preparation. Got your listening ears on? Because we got a lot to cover and only a short amount of time to do it. First off, you probably need to know where you're going. The Aztec Empire sits on what's now modern-day Mexico, and the capital city, Tenochtitlan, Mexico City today. One of the first things you'll need to know once you get there is how you're going to get around. One of the primary methods in the Aztec Empire was by canoe. The Aztecs were great engineers, and they built many waterways and canals so that they can use their canoes. They also built causeways, which are raised roads. And to get around these, they simply walked, so I hope you brought your walking shoes. Here's a fun fact. The Aztecs never used wheels or animals for travel. Instead, if they had something heavy to carry, they just hired a human bearer. Another great barrier you'll probably run into is language. Of course, they don't speak English. So I hope you brushed up on your Nahuatl, because that is the language of the Aztec Empire. Nahuatl is an agglutinative language, which combines words and phrases by putting together prefixes, suffixes, and root words to form ideas. Now, another important part. What to pack? Well, the Aztecs wore little to no clothing, so I hope you're not modest. The clothes in the Aztec Empire were made mostly by the women out of cotton. Sometimes they used ayute fiber, which came from the maguey cactus. Dyes were used in the Aztec Empire's clothes to create the many flamboyant colors we see today. The amount of decoration on your clothing depended on your social status. Common people, such as you and I, were only allowed to wear clothes made from the maguey cactus. Slaves were only allowed to wear loincloths. And people of prestige, well, some of their clothes were decorated with fur, pendants, feathers, and sometimes even gold. Now that you know where you're going, how you're going to get there, how you get around when you're there, and what you're going to be wearing when you're there, how about we discuss what you're going to eat while you're there? Many of the things that the Aztecs ate were grown. Things such as maize, also known as corn, could be eaten or ground up to make tortillas or even tamales. They also ate beans, chilies, tomatoes, limes, cashews, potatoes, sweet potatoes, peanuts, and squash. As far as meat, Aztec had a large variety, all hunted and gathered, of course, including turkey, dog, wild dog, duck, fish, rabbits, deer, shrimp, and even iguanas. Sometimes they even ate insects. The cocoa bean, which was actually also used as a currency in the Aztec Empire, was used to make a thick chocolate drink, something like hot chocolate like we have today. But instead of sugar and cream and milk, instead peppers, cornmeal, and spices were added to make a spicy chocolate. The Aztecs lived in homes that were made out of sun-dried brick called adobe. Much like clothing, the size of a home depended on your financial status. The common people were only permitted to live in single homes with one room, while those of higher stature had multiple rooms. You'll probably need to find a vacant adobe home once you get there. Here's another fun fact. The Aztec lived in square homes with flat roofs, and this was because they needed more space in hot weather, and the design of the house allowed them to do so. I bet you'd like to know how the Aztec government was run. It began with the family, and a group of families made up a capuli. The capuli leaders were in charge to make sure everyone paid their taxes and had everything they wanted and needed. The leader of the capuli was taken and put into the city council. Within the city council, there was also an executive council comprised of 4 members. Of these 4 members, one was taken and deemed to rule the city. Here's another fun fact. The Aztecs were very religious and focused on how the many gods that they worshipped, humans and nature, were related. The most important god in the Aztec Empire was Huitzilopochtli, the god of war and sacrifice. The Aztecs believed in sacrifice to pay back the debt to the gods for creating the world. There are many stories in the Aztec Empire about how the gods sacrificed themselves as sun and wind in order for the world to be created. Now that all that's out of the way, we can start talking about things for you to do while you're in the Aztec Empire. Art is one of the many things that you should not leave the empire before you see. The Aztecs didn't have a name for their art. but there were still many of it around. The Aztec art is very lifelike and reflects nature. Art, like clothes and homes, were also a thing of social status. Common people were not even allowed to own art, and most of the art in the Aztec Empire was traded to people in other tribes. Another thing you should make sure you check out before you leave the empire are the great buildings of the Aztec Empire. These are called the teocallis, also known as temples. They kind of look like pyramids with flat tops. Once you're done walking around and seeing the art and visiting the temples, another way you can entertain yourself in the Aztec Empire was through a game. Many of the games were centered around religion or politics, since those are the things that were most important to the Aztecs. One of the most popular games in the Aztec Empire is called Ulamalitzli. It's actually a ball game played with a rubber ball and a court. Another popular game in Aztec Empire was called Patoli. It's a board game played with red beans. Before you're off, I have just one more thing to give you before you leave. Some helpful things that you can say while you're in the Aztec Empire. Well, that's all for now. I hope you have a great time and come back to us safe and sound.